Well, hello, gorgeous people. I have a pumpkin spice latte here. I'm going to wait on my pumpkin muffin from Starbucks in a little bit after I film this. Going to ingest that. Today we're talking about everything I read in August, which wasn't a lot. By the way, you're probably hearing Winnie in the background. I just gave her a squeaky toy right before filming. Was that a good idea? Nope. It's also so big for her that she can't squeak it. Basically a deep regret in my life. So you're going to hear that in the background, but I did want to get to what I read in August. There wasn't a ton because I think I mentioned to you guys, we were traveling for much of August. We went to Cape Cod and we went to Boston, and then we also went to Stowe, Vermont, which was very lovely, very busy. I will say, traveling with a, well, then 3-year-old, now she's 4, it's just different than traveling on your own as a couple. We also went with my sister and her family. So there were 3 kiddos. And you realize that all of these like beautiful things that you're showing them, like specifically Nora, because she's so little, we went to the art museum in Boston. She was just like, no thanks. What she was excited about was the pool, understandably so. And then also just any escalator she could get on or elevator. Both were just fine. But if we only went somewhere that had escalators and elevators, she would have thought it was the best vacation ever. Move over the beach. But she did have fun, like building sandcastles and stuff. All that to say, I really didn't read a ton on my trip. So, pardon the short video today, but it's still a good one. So, in the vile category, I have absolutely nothing, which is a very good thing. That means I read some decent and good books. The tolerable category, I have The Betrayal of Anne Frank. This is a nonfiction book that explores who actually outed the Frank family and the other people that they were hiding with in the annex. The story of Anne Frank is so widely known because of the diary that she left behind, which oddly I still haven't read in my life. I would really like to read that. I'm on hold at the library to read that one. So it's so widely known, and yet for years people had no idea who basically told the German authorities that there was a Jewish family hiding. And now hiding was like a very common thing. And sadly, many Jewish people who hid were found and discovered, and that was no different with the Frank family. And Otto Frank, the father, was the only person in the family to survive the war and the Nazi regime, which is very devastating. And he spent his life trying to come to the truth and find out what happened. The reason that this was just tolerable for me was because it felt like it was jumping all over the place. There were a lot of potential people who were suspects that might have outed the Frank family, but it felt like it was jumping around from person to person fairly randomly, and I think that it could have been structured in a much better way. It would have been interesting for them to dive a little deeper into how finding Jewish people who were in hiding was carried out and how that occurred, and just a little bit more about the Frank family themselves. I just found it not well laid out. Now, I will say that might have been a different experience for me if I read this physically. I listened to this on audio, so maybe it was just the audio version kind of feeling like it was all over the place. Was really interesting, but yes, I felt like it's just too jumbled, if I'm being honest. Another book that I thought was tolerable was The Hotel Nantucket by Ellen Hilderbrand. Ellen Hilderbrand writes a lot of like romance books, and this is no different. I think she has like a winter series and then a ton of summer series. And they're all taking place in Nantucket, which I believe Ellen Hilderbrand either lives in Nantucket or like lived there growing up or something along those lines, because they're mostly set there. And it's just very like a feel-good kind of book. The Hotel Nantucket specifically focuses on a hotel that was refurbished. Essentially, this hotel had existed for years and years and years. There was a great fire and it fell into disrepair. During the fire, someone died. And it's interesting that one of the characters of the story is a ghost, the ghost of the woman who died all those years ago. I think it was in the 20s or 30s that she passed away at the Hotel Nantucket. And you follow a woman who is coming on board to essentially take over the hotel. She doesn't own it, but she manages it. She helps with the design, redesigning all of the rooms and making it perfect. And they're essentially, as a team, trying to get a really good review from a particular reviewer. So that is the aim of the Hotel Nantucket. But of course, all of these people who come on board, you do get to know the people like the bellmen, is that what they're called? I can't remember what they're called. The people at the front desk, all of these people, the cleaners, a lot of them have secrets, and these secrets come out. But all of it, honestly, was just very, very much a feel-good read. I will say there was romance in this book, and it did make me cringe a little bit. I don't enjoy romance, as you know, but the atmosphere and like the hotel itself, like I felt like I was there. It was interesting to be reading this book while in Cape Cod, because they keep speaking throughout it about the hydrangeas. And I will say, the hydrangeas in Cape Cod are insanely gorgeous, and they made me want to just plant hydrangeas at my house. But there's something about the soil there, I don't know what, but it's absolutely gorgeous there, and they last forever. So it felt very atmospheric and very lovely to be reading about Cape Cod essentially while being there. Moving on to the Splendid, we've got Notes on an Execution. I read this on my Kobo. This is a bit of a hard hitter. I think people might throw this in the like thriller category, and I would not consider it that. I think it's much more like literary fiction. But it basically is following a man who is on death row. He is about to be executed, I think within a 24-hour period. So you are following his last minutes of his life. You're following his thoughts and getting into his head, which is not always a great place to be, because he murdered several women. And he is very honest with you that he's done that, but also doesn't hate himself for doing that. And then you follow several women who knew this man. So you follow a detective who is trying to bring this man down, believes that he has done something. She knew him as a child, and she's trying to bring him down and prove that he is a serial killer. You follow a family who end up being tied to him because one of their daughters starts dating him in college. So you follow her along with her twin sister. You also follow his mother, which was an interesting storyline. And you learn about the kind of situation that he grew up in, which was not healthy at all. Like a lot of abuse that he witnessed and experienced to a certain degree as well. And so you're getting to know this man via all of these different characters, all of these different women. And you're also watching this man basically counting down the hours, minutes, and seconds until he is killed. So it was a bit of a, honestly, as you can tell, a serious book, not an uplifting book, but I thought it was really an interesting way to get into this man's head, considering that he like killed off women. It's only fitting that women are the ones who tell his story. And it's not like he is painted in this always horrific light, but he's also not painted in the best light, of course, either. Very interesting. I thought it was pretty good. I was glad to have finished it, if I'm being honest, just because it was quite a heavy one. Another book that I really enjoyed was Only the Beautiful. This is Susan Meissner's latest book. Oh, you guys are probably wondering. I'm randomly wearing a pipe cleaner. Today is Nora's last day at daycare, and she randomly gave me a pipe cleaner as I was on my way out. Anyway, Only the Beautiful, yes, by Susan Meissner. This was really interesting. This follows a young woman who, as her family is killed in a terrible car accident, she is essentially taken in by the people who her whole family had worked for. They own a vineyard, and so she goes to live with them, but essentially she is really a maid. Like, this woman takes her in, but says, oh, you know, you're gonna probably end up in like cleaning services as you get older. This is in the 30s or 40s, I can't remember. And so as a result, you should probably start learning that here. So she's not allowed to sit with them at the table at dinner time. It's really, honestly, quite screwed up. And while she's living with them, she gets pregnant and they throw her out. And not only do they throw her out, because she has like a medical condition, I guess you would call it, in which people and words and things in the world come into color for her. Like, if she thinks of a dog, she'll see the color green, let's say. And so she has this condition, and she's told them about it. And they have, as a result, taken that information and they're like, you're going into like a medical, not an insane asylum, but something along those lines, where they're going to test her and question her about all sorts of things. So she goes and stays in this facility for years and years and years. She does not want to be there. She is not happy there. So you follow her then, and then you follow her briefly afterwards. Meanwhile, you also follow another character who knew this girl. She's older than her, but they became kind of friends. She had lived in Germany during the war, and she was caring for the children of a family, one of which was disabled. And of course, as you know, the Germans at that time sent many, many disabled people to their death, and also tested on all sorts of people. And so in this case, a similar thing happened. And so after she leaves Germany, she decides she wants to go home to America and find out what happened to this girl. Where is this girl? She goes on the hunt to find her. And she's an older woman at this point. And it was a really interesting book. I really, really liked it. Susan Meissner just writes interesting historical fiction that looks at things from a slightly different perspective, and I really enjoyed it. And last but not least is my favorite book that I read in August, and that had to be easily Girl Forgotten by Karen Slaughter. So this is a follow-up to Pieces of Her. I won't go too much into that, but this storyline follows Andrea, one of the characters in Pieces of Her. Now, she has become a U.S. Marshal, and she has just graduated and yet is immediately thrown into the system. She's tasked with taking care of a judge. There has been some very terrible threats posed towards a judge in Long Beach, and she has to get there and try to protect the judge. However, this area is the area that her father, who has proven himself to be a maniacal, like cult leader-esque person, that's where he grew up. And so she kind of wants to go and learn a little bit more about her father. there is also a terrible crime that was committed many years ago that involves the judge and might involve Andrea. So the judge's own teenage daughter back in 1982 in Longville Beach is murdered. Her name is Emily. She's getting ready to go to the prom, and she is found murdered after leaving for the prom. And the case kind of goes nowhere. No one is put behind bars. And of course, this has devastated the judge and her family. And Emily is quite curious because she wonders if her father might have been involved. She knows that her father knew Emily and was in the same like social circle as Emily. And so she wants to dive into that. What I loved was how terrible this social circle ended up being. Like every single person other than Emily was a bad person, like genuinely, like some psychopaths, but also some just nasty people. And it was fascinating to read about. I really loved that you do read from Andrea's perspective, but you also read from Emily's perspective, growing up in that situation with so much pressure being a judge's daughter, and then also so much pressure within this strange circle of friends that are not really good friends, like at all. This honestly is my worst nightmare when it comes to like who Nora would hang out with. Like, I hope that she just has some like nerdy, nice friends and nothing like this. This would be the worst case scenario. But I was intrigued. I listened to this on audio. I just sped through it. I wanted to be reading this all the time. I will say, yes, it's the second in the series, but you don't have to read it in order. Really, you could read this and then go back and read Pieces of Her. I don't think you'd be really missing out. Now, as a stickler, of course, if it was me, I would read them in order. But I'm just weird. I'm a bit weird. So those are all of the books that I read in August. Really enjoyed my August reading, I would say. I'm more excited about my September reading. I think you just watched my September TBR. So excited. I hope that you had a lovely August reading month. What did you read? What was your best book of the month? I'd love to know. I'll talk with you very soon. Bye, guys.